an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
If you're one of the British homes with super-fast broadband, well, you're lucky. A new report by the telecoms watchdog Ofcom has found that 2 million households across the country still cannot get high-speed access to the internet. So how to improve that performance? Ofcom is carrying out a fundamental review of the telecoms industry due to report next month, a review which could end with a decision to split up BT. Our business correspondent, Helia Ebrahimi, has this report.
Britain, coming to a standstill. Our future held hostage by a broadband network some claim is already out of date, rusting rather than reaching.
We'll lose our competitiveness, we'll fail to be able to deliver innovative solutions to customers, and ultimately we as a nation will be the poorer.
It's frankly embarrassing that I have to sort of make an excuse that I can't do this because the file won't leave my desktop.
And the real risk? Not just that UK PLC fails customers today, but that the stakes become even higher in tomorrow's world.
Wait 5 years and watch the markets that we're in disappear and go somewhere else. We will not be participating in the world scene.
From London's tech city to some of the most remote postcodes around the British Isles, concern is growing that the copper wire infrastructure is simply not good enough. In the backdrop, one of the fiercest corporate battles being duked out, and within a month, the result of a root and branch investigation into how the industry should be carved up.
The existing model works well, we think it can be enhanced, but this is not the moment to create huge upheaval. So we are the national champion. We are providing the infrastructure that is the fabric of society in many ways, and we take that responsibility very seriously. And that's why I think the vision that we've set out is the right one for Britain. We're the ones who are thinking about the UK as a whole.
Today's Ofcom report offers a snapshot of broadband coverage across Britain, and the verdict, well, it's not all rosy. While superfast broadband gets into around 83% of UK homes, in rural areas it's still lagging, reaching only 37% of homes. And almost 2.5 million homes are not even getting 10 megabytes per second, the speed the government has earmarked as a legal right by 2020. And take a look at the supposed engine of future economic growth, small and medium-sized companies. The warning from Ofcom, by 2017, 18% may still struggle to have super-fast broadband. But if the system is at risk of failing, who's to blame? BT, the government, the regulator? The debate has stirred up one of the bitterest business battles of our time, all sides convinced that they have the national interest at heart.
Look, I'm frustrated by the service levels that we get today in Openreach. And I will be frustrated going forward if we don't get the level of investment in the future infrastructure that I passionately believe that we need.
And how's Sky disadvantaged by BT owning Openreach?
We'd like Openreach to be a little bit more focused on customers. We would like access to faster broadband speeds, and we can only do that if the network provider, Openreach, is able to deliver those. That requires investment.
The reason why BT and Sky are locked in a war of words is because of this. Openreach is fully owned by BT Group. It runs the copper network that connects the majority of households in this country to the internet. Its rivals like Sky and TalkTalk are also its customers because they too have to connect to the network through Openreach. But in January, the regulator is poised to launch its biggest shake-up of the industry in a decade. One of the more controversial options, splitting up BT.
Well, that would not be a good outcome, not just for BT shareholders, but more importantly for the country as a whole. It would create huge instability, huge upheaval. We'd spend our time separating the businesses rather than spending our time rolling out the network, rolling out the next generation of technology, addressing the last 5%. That's where we should be focused.
Wouldn't you admit that service levels are simply not good enough?
Our service levels can be improved. I'm not going to argue with that. We deliver everything that we're supposed to deliver. Customer expectations are increasing faster than anybody in the market is able to meet at the moment. This isn't just an Openreach challenge. Every service provider needs to step up.
And imagine this scenario. Openreach is operating exactly as it is now. It's regulated exactly as it is now, except it's owned by Sky. You wouldn't like that, would you?
Would I like? No, I wouldn't like that. I don't think I would be as confident that they will look after the national interests as I think we've demonstrated for 170 years that we've been able to do. We've got a track record of serving the country as a whole, not just cherry picking the best parts of the country, but providing a network that is open to all, has competitive prices. So I'm confident we can do it. I don't know with the same degree of confidence that anybody else can.
The two broadband pinch points that have emerged in the UK are firstly rural Britain, where consumers are few and far between, and also the centre of London, where customer demand is outpacing capacity. Here in the Blackdown Hills, we're in one of the most beautiful places in the country. It may seem a long way from the hubbub of the city, but there are lots of local businesses trying to compete globally. But their problem remains connecting to the rest of the world. A thatched roof, a few undulating hills, but Marcus Durant's business is suffering because of broadband. His frustration is not just with service providers, but also with the government.
I think the responsibility is firmly with the government for holding BT account. If they spent the £1 billion taxpayers' money on the areas that were hard to reach first, then I think the other areas would have filled in automatically anyway. At the moment, BT and Openreach, they're doing, as I say, what any large corporation would do. They're maximising profits. That's what I would do in my business if I could.
Rural businesses across Britain are frustrated at what they see as a lack of competence in actually rolling out superfast broadband, both from the government and from BT. In their eyes, this has created a two-tier society.
So the antennas are up there behind those belfry shutters.
Peter Cochrane worked for 38 years at BT, ending up as the Chief Technology Officer. These days, though, he has his own consultancy business and has managed to convert a medieval church into a broadband hotspot.
Our infrastructure is not adequate, it's not fit for purpose, we're already struggling. Some of the decisions before the regulator I think are quite dangerous. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are going to be many solutions, and a good one is to take the UK funding for broadband, the BDUK broadband fund, and give some of that, or all of it, to villages and communities to allow them to install their own fibre, their own networks.
But is that realistic? Are communities going to be able to do that themselves?
They've already done it. This community has. And here's the acid test. If a community actually wants broadband, they will find a way. If they were to help communities to get started and then provide the services, they'd have a much better business. They would go from being considered as villains to be considered as heroes.
And the BT response?
There is a clear plan, and we're confident that we'll play our role in delivering that. But there will be people who aren't served, and we're sympathetic to that. So we're ready to help here.
Within 5 years, 50 billion things we use, like cars, kettles, and even heart monitors, will be connected to the internet, all competing for bandwidth. The question will no longer be how quickly can you stream Netflix on your TV, but how fast you can be treated from home with a heart condition. In the next month, Ofcom will have to decide whether BT is the company to deliver this highway of data, or whether it's time for a fundamental shake-up.
So do you want to check the quality of your home broadband? There's a new app from the regulators, Ofcom. It works by sending sample wireless signals to see if data is flowing uninterrupted from routers to phones and tablets. Matt Fry went to speak to Ofcom's chief executive, Sharon White, and asked her about the app's uses.
The very basic things we've found is that your router could be on the floor rather than on a table, and therefore getting some interference, or too close to an electrical device. As simple as having your landline phone and your router close together, or a baby monitor or a photocopier, and actually just by creating more distance between them, reduce the interference, and you can get maybe 1 or 2 extra megabytes of speed on your broadband.
So how are we doing? I mean, how well is the country connected? Because the Prime Minister gave us this whole vision of the country running its existence, everyone's homes being run through broadband.
If you look even in the last year, more of us have got connections to superfast broadband or are subscribing to new 4G services on our mobile, but there are still big parts of the country, particularly if you're living in a rural area where connectivity is not as good as it should be, where maybe 40% aren't getting speeds of 10 megabits per second, a kind of decent service. You'll find that because the companies understandably have given priority to residential consumers, if you're a small business and you're in a business park, you're even less likely to have good connectivity than as a residential consumer. And that's why we're wanting to give more priority to this issue, and it's why we're working closely with government to make sure that they get the connectivity that they need.
Is BT up to the job?
I think BT has done a good job with the rollout.
You don't sound that convinced.
I think they've done a good job with the rollout. I mean, if you look at even in the last year, there are hundreds of thousands of more people who have been connected because of the relationship, the partnership between BT and the government. What I would say is that there is more to do, and I think BT and the other companies that we regulate would recognise the same.
Do you think BT should be broken up to do the job?
We're looking at the whole of the communications sector at the moment. We're taking all sorts of evidence, looking at questions about how the consumer is best going to be served, what's the best structure for BT, indeed the rest of the market too, and we'll have some conclusions in.
So there could be quite a radical solution to all this.
I think we'll see. We're looking very closely and very carefully at the evidence, and we'll come forward with some conclusions next year.
What do you think should happen to the BBC? And in particular, I'd like to hear your comment about this rather ripe rumour that Ofcom might be in a position to have to act as the BBC's trustees.
I would say, it is a question that the government will opine on over the next coming months as part of its charter review, and I think, we'll be watching eagerly and with interest, like lots of other interested parties at the moment.
And finally, a question a little bit closer to home. What about the privatisation of Channel 4? And that's been publicly talked about.
I think, again, we will wait to see how the debate and the decision runs with government in January. From our perspective, we are, it's important that the whole of the system, whether that's Channel 4, the BBC, is delivering its remit to provide, great quality programming.
Sharon White answering some very important questions posed by Matt Fry earlier there.
I've been getting away with it all